I hired a full-time dispatcher when I had two technicians, and my client satisfaction rate went through the roof, and we didn't fix anything faster.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study series. On today's episode, we have Jeremy Valverde, who is the owner of Affinity Tech Solutions, an IT and cybersecurity firm that he founded back in 2015, based in Eustis, Florida. With over 15 years of experience in the IT industry, Jeremy specializes in managed services, cybersecurity solutions, and disaster recovery for small to medium sized businesses. Prior to founding Affinity Tech Solutions, he held leadership roles in mobile device development and technical support companies like Go Summit and Capcom, and we're excited to have him on the show today. Jeremy, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Devin. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited to talk about some of the work that you're doing with Affinity Tech Solutions. But before we get there, I'd love to start, Jeremy, with maybe a couple of minutes, just a quick background on who you are, where you came from, and how you landed as the founder of Affinity Tech Solutions.
Absolutely. It's been a little bit of a ride to get here. But yeah, the '08 crash pushed me out of construction back into IT, which led me down the development route, end user support, consulting, all of that in the healthcare space before eventually founding Affinity Tech in 2015. More, it's something I'd always wanted to do. Since I was taking Cisco CCNA in high school and always wanted to have my own IT company, and finally hit that point where, all right, well, now's as good a time as ever. Why not just kind of leap off and do it? And so, yeah, took a leap of faith, and here we are 9 years later, still moving forward.
So it's really cool that you've had this experience over, the last 15 years of kind of digging into the whole cybersecurity space. When you decided to kind of branch out on your own and take on the challenge of building your business, I'm sure initially there was that scenario where you're wearing a lot of hats or you're taking on a lot of the different roles in trying to build the business. On one side of things, you got to find clients and customers and kind of give them the whole pitch, and then on the other side you have to follow through with that and deliver on all the promises that you made in that first half of the first leg of the journey. So I wonder if maybe you could share a little bit about how your role has evolved as the owner of Affinity Tech, from the startup to where you're at now.
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, and absolutely. Back in the beginning when I started cold turkey. I didn't even have a part-time gig before just quitting my full-time job and launching Affinity. And so in the beginning, it was if I wasn't working on somebody's computer, working on their network, I was networking, finding BNI groups, chambers of commerce, meetup groups, CEO groups. I was probably networking 30, 35 hours a week, because I was only working 4 hours a week. And so building that community for referrals and had been really successful for me. I'm not big on the cold calling or the door-to-door knocking.
Mm.
I would rather chew my arm off. In fact, I still have the same stack of flyers that my dad helped me create in 2015. Printed off 100 flyers to go door to door, and I still have every one of those flyers because I never knocked on a single door. I would rather go meet a bunch of strangers in a room than walk into a business. Yeah, little different now, a little more comfortable with it now as things have evolved. But in the beginning, it was I was everything, and I saw some cycles in my business actually as it was growing. We grew very, very rapidly. We were over doubling the business every year for the first 5 years, and I found that every quarter I would have a new record month. So month one, not a lot of work. I'm out there networking. Month two, doing the work, still networking. Month three, I'm only working because I'd built up so much business that month four, now I have to go back to networking. And so here we are, month four, I had a dip in revenue because I had spent so much time working in month three that I had to get back out into the networking side, back out into marketing. And so I recognized this over about 18 months. I mean, you can set a ruler on the growth chart. It was just up, down, up, down. So it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, which is when I hired my first couple of technicians so that they could do more of the technical work side, but still was kind of caught in that rat race of doing all the bookkeeping, and doing all the selling, doing all the tier three work. And so, I kind of looked around a little bit and got involved in some marketing through Robin Robbins or Technology Marketing Toolkit, kind of learned how to market a little bit better, a lot better. And then worked on hiring some administrative staff. So hiring a bookkeeper, um, hiring, account manager, hiring people to help out with the marketing, and building those things so I could focus on what I was good at, the business development, still doing the networking, still doing owner-led sales, but having a lot of the day-to-day stuff kind of take care of, being taken care of by employees. The more I could delegate, the more time it opened up for me to continue to build.
So, in terms of milestones along the way, there's moments where you realize, oh, I don't have enough time to fulfill on this. I need to bring somebody in, but you also have to have the revenue to match to be able to support that kind of growth. So, in terms of key milestones, revenue-wise, where were you and kind of where are you at now that has allowed you to create a little bit more opportunity in the business?
Uh, yeah, so like I said, for the first few years, it's easy to double a business from zero. Year one, we closed, first full calendar year was right around 100. The next year was, a little over 200. The next year we were approaching 500. The next year we were at like 750. And then we were at a million, and then, 1.5 million. And then I don't know how many years in. Last year we closed out at about 2.7. And I had a really interesting opportunity, interesting growth opportunity, a learning experience. We did get fortunate in some of that growth. We had a whale client. We brought them on. They were small, and over 5 years, they just exploded in growth. And it was great for revenue and for growth,
Hmm.
until they got so big that they decided to go internal IT. They were at that point, and then we lost a massive client last year, that ended up being like 70% of our revenue. And so, whereas last year we closed at 2.7, this year we're going to be closer to 1 million in revenue. There's a lot of interesting lessons learned in that because, you hear it, not all revenue is good revenue. Um, but you don't always truly understand what that means until you go through something like that where you wake up and it's like all of a sudden 70% of the revenue walks out the door. Now it's like, oh crap, what's next? Um, and so the milestones that kind of allowed us to build, we were growing so quickly that, hitting that million, that 1.5, going over 2 million was all good. But trying to figure out how to build the foundation of the business through that growth was a struggle because we were outgrowing our foundation as we were building it with this big whale of a client. And so, looking back, great learning experience. We live in a small community, a lot of it's handshakes. And yes, we've been told for years, contracts, contracts, contracts. And now every deal has a 3-year contract tied to it. So we don't get these notices with, 60-day buyouts and that kind of thing, because it does impact the business itself. Uh, so, but yeah, so that's kind of
Yeah.
been building up, kind of a little reset here. And as we're building back up, really looking at financial metrics, not just top line, bottom line revenue, how much revenue is every tech generating, watching the profit margins across all of our contracts, not just the big ones, and really honing in on the numbers, the things that you read every business book. They say, hey, watch your numbers, manage to the numbers. Here's your best in class metrics. I'm an IT technician. I'm a technician that just so happened to start a business and it grew. Um, Really kind of flip it on its head a little bit is like, hey, it's really time to start looking at it truly as a business owner and making sure every aspect of the business is profitable. It's very easy to hide not loss, but lower profit margins when you have big profit margin clients. Um, and lost revenue is lost revenue. Doesn't matter if it's $10 a month or $100,000 a month. It adds up fast.
There's a lot of relatability in that experience of building a foundation around having uh, you know, a stable client that allows you to kind of pursue the other elements of running a business. But it kind of points at two cliche things that are sort of coming true. And I'm very present to this idea of 80% of your revenue coming from 20% of your clients, 80% of new clients coming from 20% of the marketing work that you do. These things are all very much true,
Mhm.
and they can either serve as kind of a roadblock or a hurdle, or they can serve as the opportunity. I know, a guy like Alex Hermosi talks about this a lot. How, well, why don't you just focus on that 20% activity that's getting you the most business if you actually do want to like grow the business, or why don't you divert the funds that are coming, the 80% of the funds that are coming into the 20% effort. So there's a balancing act that I think that you've kind of pointed at, Jeremy, in this attempt to both do the work that's fulfilling for you, like you have an interest in cybersecurity and in this space and in technology, but also there's an entrepreneurial mindset of like I have to work on the business, not in the business, and then balancing that out. So, I mean, how do you approach that? And or are you still? And what kind of advice do you have for other people who are kind of navigating that balancing act?
Yeah, I think I talked to a lot of, peers in the industry, owner founders, and it feels like, at least for me, that sometimes I get stuck and I have to do it. Only I can do it because it needs to be done right. It needs to be done 100%, and only I can do that. It's a lack of trust in my team. And I
Mm,
found myself getting caught in that trap a lot of times because if I'm working at a client and let's say I'm billing out at $185 an hour for my time, right?
mhm,
And that 1 hour of time or that 2 hours of time that I'm bringing in 185 or $370 worth of revenue, I'm losing 2 hours of prospecting to find my next big client that's going to bring in, two to $10,000 a month of revenue. And
mm,
so if I'm focusing on this low value work that I've hired people to do because I want it done perfect, when the reality is there's no such thing as perfection, mistakes are going to happen. And if I don't let my team make those mistakes and then deal with them, going back to your 80/20 rule, I have to be comfortable with 80%. Goal is 100%. 80% of the time, the work is going to be done right. It's going to be done on time. It's going to be done with no issues. The 20% of the time, I just need to say, you know what? It's part of doing business. If I want to scale and grow this thing, if I don't want to be stuck here in Florida my entire life and not be able to travel because one of my client servers might go down, I
mm,
have to be okay with managing that 20% discrepancy through account management, through good relationships with my accounts, and just being upfront and honest with my clients and having those conversations. Then the team can grow. Then the team makes mistakes. Then they get better and they make less mistakes. Um, but just being okay with it's not going to be perfect was a massive hurdle for me in delegating. There was a point in time I had 5 techs sitting around doing internal work because I was the one on site doing every onboarding. I was the one on site, um, doing the major events that were happening. And I was paying 5 people to sit in the office, and sometimes half of them were twiddling their thumbs because I was out there doing the work. And I looked at
right,
that, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. Yeah,
right.
Um, so being comfortable with that delegation part, um, and then navigating between delegation and what is it? Delegating versus abdicating.
Mm,
So I'm really good at either micromanaging or abdicating. It's very difficult to come into the middle and actually delegate something and communicate the requirements and then trust that they're going to get it done and then follow up and inspect it versus being directly involved, telling them every move or Just saying, oh, hey, here, go do this thing over here. And by the way, I'm around if you need me. So really honing in on that delegation aspect was a big difference. Made a big difference.
Well, and something else that I think you're pointing at is getting the enrollment of the team. That's a big part of it because you, as the owner of the company, are always going to be at 100% committed to this thing being a success, right? You're even 110,
Mhm.
you're driving the whole machine forward or pushing it yourself. And when you bring somebody new into the team, well, it's not their thing. And so you can't necessarily
Right.
expect them to be 110% in it as well. But if you
Well,
can get them up to that 80 or 90% or whatever, at least this is kind of what the buzz is in the celebrity entrepreneurial world is if you can get people that are at 80% commitment to the work that you're doing and then continue to nurture them in that space and help them towards their own dream, you're going to have this really symbiotic relationship. And of course, that's all lovely fun rainbows and fiction because the reality is that people are unpredictable. They're
mhm.
hard to manage. There's a lot going on. We all have our own lives, and it's becoming increasingly more complicated with all of the different things that are out there. So yeah, really finding that groove where you and your team are in sync and you are all driving towards one kind of uniform goal is very different or difficult. So I wonder, Jeremy, what makes your approach to business development different than other people? Like, what do you notice that you do that's a little bit more unique to, your signature or Affinity Tech Solutions kind of ecosystem?
So one of the things I've got to give credit to my wife for this one. When we scaled from 5 to 12 employees in a very short period of time with our large client, we were having communication issues in the office.
Mm,
Uh, uh, by nature, I'm not a good communicator, right? Put me behind a keyboard and a mouse, put me in a back room. That's where I thrive. Just give me Google and, let's just move forward. I grew up through my career in, hey, here's a problem, figure it out. And I think we're losing that in a lot of the younger techs because of how easy it is to do, find Google or find things on YouTube. It can be very, very difficult to find people that can just go and figure things out. Um, and it was starting to frustrate me. It's like, hey, this is basic stuff. Like, just go figure it out. I figured it out. You go figure it out. And so my wife actually brought in a communications consultant, and this was eye-opening for me. For about 18 months, we had uh, this communications consultant come into our office and work with my team on a monthly basis. We would do 2-hour trainings, and once a quarter, we would do a half-day training on a Saturday. And learning each other's communication styles, how they need to communicate with me and my communication style when they need to be heard, and how to communicate with them. We had 4 generations working in my office at one point, and every generation works, they communicate very, very differently. Not just communication styles within a generation, then you spread that out over 4 generations. You can imagine we had a lot of miscommunication in the office. We had a lot of tension in the office. And working with that communications consultant helped my technicians better serve my clients because when a doctor or a business owner called in and said, I don't care what the problem is, just effing fix it. They're not upset with the tech, right? They're
right.
not, they're upset with the situation that they can't work. They're upset that, they need to be billing out at X number of dollars an hour and they can't right now. They're losing money because their tech's not working. It has nothing to do with the technician. They're just upset, and that's okay. That's why we exist. That's why we're here. If they were never upset, we wouldn't have a job. And so helping to reframe that in they're upset, let me fix this and this type of communication style. I don't need to explain it to them. I don't need to give them the 10-minute rundown. They don't care. Just say, yes, I'm going to fix it. I'll call you back. And then call them back in 10 or 15 minutes when it's fixed and everybody's happy. Get them off the phone. Just that little bit in communication, it has shocked me at how much of a difference communication makes in business. It's not something I get right all of the time because it is something that I actively have to work towards. It's not the way my brain works.
Mm,
But communication, having a dispatcher that answers the phone live that's non-technical. I hired a full-time dispatcher when I had two technicians, and my client satisfaction rate went through the roof, and we didn't fix anything faster. Like there was nothing that was resolved any faster. We had no additional technicians, but just being able to get somebody on the phone that says, yes, we have your problem. Yes, we're going to get to it as soon as we can, made all the difference in the world with communication. And so that's something that we've strived to continue to do is answer the phones live, be responsive, and that is a key differentiator right there. Nothing to do with technical work. Nothing's getting done any faster, just that communication piece.
You know, it's so funny that you mentioned that. I'm reminded of a study that I heard in I can't remember if it was Robert Cialdini's Persuasion, I think is where I read about this. So they did this experiment with waiters and waitresses at a restaurant, and half of the team was told or instructed to simply say yes and agree whenever somebody was ordering something, and the other half of the team was directed to simply repeat what the client or customer was asking for. No confirmation or anything like that. Just repeat. So if you use, I want a steak and I want it well done. Steak, well done. Anything else? And so the difference that they found, and I'm sure it was somewhere in the kind of mid 20s percent of a difference in the value of tip afterwards. And so the people who were repeating it back were the
Uh-huh.
ones who were seeing the increased tipping versus the
Yeah.
people who were just agreeing and saying yes and next, they were
Uh-huh.
getting tipped less. And so there's this really funny thing that we have that like a bias in terms of the way that we like communicate. And so for you to and your team to kind of grasp this concept of compartmentalization where hey, the client came to you with a problem. You're not the problem
Right.
is the problem. And so you can now come from a frame of collaboration versus like competing to be who to see who's more right. And obviously the
Uh-huh.
tech knows more, so they're all always their ego is going to lead them into being right versus
Uh-huh.
like, hey, listen, this is the problem. Let's just collaborate. So now you kind of turn and now you both front face and go into that problem um from a position of where both people stand to gain something from the interaction. So I love that that's a part of the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
As we kind of look forward into the future of Affinity Tech Solutions, you know, you mentioned we're kind of seeing a bit of a dip right now because of that client, that kind of turnover or whatever. And I get it, bittersweet win, right? When you have a client that you've
Uh-huh.
been so successful with that they have grown to a place where like, actually, we're going to take this in-house now. Thank you for leading us here.
Yeah.
That's a great win. But what else is on the horizon for Affinity? What are you kind of aiming at? What are some of the bigger goals?
So right now, a lot of it is in, cybersecurity and compliance. That's like the big thing these days is cybersecurity compliance, cybersecurity compliance. So that is a big play for us. We're working in regulated industries, HIPAA, finance, are the two, medical and finance. So heavily regulated. And so that is the next step. I was just on a call with small financial advisor company, just right before our call. And even though there's only seven of them in this firm, getting them to understand that yes, they still need to do compliance, they still need to focus on cybersecurity, even though they have a broker dealer, they still have cyber requirements because there's these pocket industries where they're typically independent agents that they haven't had to deal with this. They're kind of like independent contractors that band together under a single banner, and getting them to understand that yes, this is still something that you need to pay attention to and invest in. It's still a lot of education there.
Hmm.
Out Outside of that, I mean, the other one is AI, right? AI is massive right now. We're working on a solution right now so that it ties into our phone system, and when our tech hangs up the phone call, it's going to auto transcribe that entire phone call and update auto task with the notes and the time tracking. And we're even going to start working on using AI to start classifying the ticket type, subtype while they're on the phone call. So when they hang up that call, they review it, hit save. They're not spending 10 minutes typing in notes and trying to summarize the call themselves. What did I do? Hang up the call and it's done. It saves 10 minutes per call or 15 minutes per call. That's a whole nother call per day that they can do and just make it efficient. And when it goes into the ticket notes, the description is summarized, but then the whole transcribed call goes into the internal notes field plus sentiment analysis. So if it was a negative call, then I can be notified as the owner or the manager, have my manager notified so that when they call back, you inevitably get that text message to the owner saying, hey, so and so, blah, 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 I'm so upset right now. And it's like, well, now I've got to go pull the call audio and listen to it. No, I can go right to the ticket notes, see what happened, or be notified in advance and proactively reach out to that client and say, hey, you know, saw this happened, how do we make this right? Here's the next steps. How are you doing right now? Again, going back to that proactive communication to kind of de-escalate things before they, boil up to the owner, is pretty wild.
Yeah, the opportunity for the interpretation of conversations and then what you can take from that and how that serves the client in the long run is incredibly valuable. And I'm very present to this idea that this is the worst the technology is ever going to be. And I'm in my own biased opinion, because I'm very much involved in AI and development right now, I am very excited and very impressed by just what we're at currently,
Hmm.
and the prospect of what it could potentially turn into. So when you are aiming at some of these bigger goals, like how are you measuring your progress? What do you see as important kind of KPIs or things that you kind of have to keep a finger on the pulse of to make sure that you're actually headed in the right direction?
So, with the AI specifically and some of the stuff we're working on integrating into auto tasks. So keeping track of how quickly technicians are actually getting notes updated in tickets and how much time is spent updating those notes.
Mm.
We have our technicians actually, if they're not tracking real time live during their call and they come back to the ticket afterwards, that's a separate note and a separate time entry. So we can say how much time does it take. And I'll tell you, it's crazy because I've had techs that'll take 2.5, 3 hours a week just updating ticket notes. That's 2.5 hours of billable time just entering notes or entering and creating documentation. This is like lost time. This is time that doesn't need to be lost when you have AI that you can do this transcription and just get that time back. Um, and looking forward, if you're on that call and you always get that while you're here on the call, while you're on the call, hey, can you help me with this? Oh, we need to submit a ticket for that. I can't help you right now. The AI can pick that up and automatically create that ticket. By the way, I'll create that ticket for you. It's going to be for this, and we're going to need to do this. With AI, you can pick all that up, automatically create the ticket, assign it to the user, assign it to the technician, dispatch it, and the tech doesn't need to spend 3 to 5 minutes opening a ticket
Mm.
if they remember to open it,
Right.
right? If they remember to open it. And so I'm really excited about a lot of the automation that can happen from the transcribed call. Because I'm really big on trying to get my text to call the end users. It really ticks me off when I see a ticket and they've just tried emailing them like 3 times with no response. It's like, guys, pick up the phone and call. Pick up the phone and call. Get that audio going and then get that transcribed. Use the AI to make that more efficient. That's where I think a lot of it's going. And then looking beyond that, now that we're integrated into that, and starting to build those processes with the live calls, 6 to 12 months of data, now you can start creating the bots. Now you can start creating those interactive bots that are based on your data. And this isn't public data. This is, private AI models based on your data and having that respond and how do you respond and what are your processes and getting all of that, into automation, I think is the next step after that. Because going back to 80/20, 80% of what we do could be automated. You've got companies that are doing that already on the technical side that are automating those technical steps. And so bridging that gap between the end user and that automation and making that a little bit more streamlined, I think it'd be big.
Yeah, I love when a conversation comes full circle and we're back at that 80/20 rule. You know, the 80% of the work that we're doing is repetitive, mundane, boring stuff that could be augmented, if not enhanced, by having
Uh-huh.
additional tools like AI and transcriptions and interpretations and note taking and all the other cool things. I know for us, that's a big part of what we do when in our own sales cycle is for every kind of step along the way, especially when there's like inter-team involvement. So you have different members being involved in the process to try to update, the third person in line in the telephone game. It's
Right.
incredibly challenging in any business. I don't care who you are or what you think you've got figured out. It's still very difficult.
Mhm.
And so some of these new tools and technologies are really helping support that. And I think that's definitely an exciting prospect. Jeremy, you've been
Mhm.
incredibly generous with your time here. I'm very grateful for the insight that you've shared so far. To wrap things up, I wonder if we can leave on a high note here. If there was, a single piece of advice that you might be able to offer others who are kind of out there and up to it and facing similar challenges, what would that piece of advice be?
Don't neglect the little things.
Mm,
The death by a thousand cuts. We've been in a very good season from COVID in a technology industry. And, at least in my business, I let a lot of little things go. And don't neglect the little things. It's the little things that keep us competitive. It's how we keep our edge. And when we let those little things go, it's just a slow slide down. We've got to check ourselves. And don't be afraid to do things differently. There's always a better way. Don't be afraid to do things differently.
love that. Very sound advice. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or maybe work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can shoot me an email, Jeremy at affinitytechsolutions.com. Best way to get a hold of me, find me on LinkedIn and or Facebook. Those would all be great channels.
Beautiful. We'll make sure to link to that stuff in the show notes so anybody that's listening or watching can find you easily. And on that
Great.
note, if you wanted to get in touch with me and my team for any of your marketing needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.